The Grand Army of the Republic had the actual all-terrain armored transport. What's up, Meta Nerds? This video is all about the HAVw A6 Juggernaut, aka the clone turbo tank. We will do a complete breakdown using things like cross-sections and a tour of this vehicle via Battlefront 2, as well as get into its history, going from its time with the Republic, up through the Empire, and see how rebels and primitive tribes found ways to overcome this thing. And we'll close out with some behind-the-scenes facts, but let's start with the history. It was produced by Kuat Drive Yards, the same company that would create the Venators and Imperial Star Destroyers, as well as all the walkers we know, being produced either directly at the KDY orbital shipyards, or through their subsidiary Rathana Heavy Engineering. What the Republic paid for these was never declassified, but it is estimated to have cost around 350,000 credits. The cost of most other walkers is unknown, but that would be about 4.5 times the cost of the AAT, which is just a really great deal. Though we don't see them in the very beginning of the Clone Wars, they were definitely deployed by 21 BBY. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka were leading an assault on Felucia when their forces were overwhelmed. Ahsoka, perhaps drunk off the awesomeness of riding atop a Juggernaut into battle, refuses to retreat and almost has to be physically pulled off the battlefront. As they escape via LAAT gunship, she looks down and watches her HAV-6 explode. There's some debate as to what exactly caused this vehicle to blow, since it wasn't hit by any explosives, no tanks, or even wrist rockets. It's stated that the plates that cover this vehicle are, quote, thermally superconducting armor that absorbs energy beams and spreads heat harmlessly over a wide area. With hundreds, if not thousands of droids firing on the Juggernaut at the same time, no matter how you spread it, there'll no longer be just a harmless amount of heat. The interior may have been cooking, and may have set off some of the Tabana gas and/or rocket stores that are located in this section, causing the cockpit to pop right off. Or the simple solution is that it was just scuttled, intentionally destroyed by the crew so that it wouldn't fall into the enemy's hands. But this whole evacuation happens very fast, so I don't know if there would have been enough time to set charges. Maybe it would have been as simple as throwing a grenade into the rocket pack on the way out, or that the Juggernauts all have a pre-programmed self-destruct command that could have been easily issued as they fled. I really feel like the way it was shot was supposed to demonstrate an overwhelming amount of small arms fire, but definitely let me know what you think down in the comments below. For me, the idea that on some battlefront there could have been hundreds of clones inside being cooked to death, if there was enough droids blasting it, is both interesting and terrifying. The following year would see another use of Juggernauts on Felucia, again being accompanied by ATTEs and Ahsoka. Then in the final year of the Clone Wars, they would be seen at the Republic Center for Military Operations. It's unclear if they are moving to a location for deployment, or to be serviced, or just on patrol so that the crew can get some hours behind the controls. And it is important to note that throughout the war, it is claimed that the CIS was stealing shipments of Juggernauts that left the KDY orbital facility. But we can find no visual confirmation of a CIS Juggernaut in use, so whether they were just kept to study weaknesses, or just a rumor, is unknown. But the most notable use would be during the Battle of Kashyyyk. Here there would be at least 9 Juggernauts deployed, and seemingly from just a single Venator. Their offensive abilities proved quite impressive, though really they could have just literally rolled over the invading CIS forces. So since this is the perfect place to take a closer look, let's head down to the sandy beaches of Kachiro with our cross-section in hand to see where everything was and how it all worked. We gotta start off with a relatively mundane aspect, cargo and fuel. You see, the Juggernaut was capable of hauling tons of supplies, or munitions, food, water, and Bacta for other clones and allies. It is unclear if this behemoth runs in a form of liquid gas, electricity, or just the same Tabana gas used for its laser cannons, but whatever it needs, it is pumped in through these hoses that draw from the Venator. Venators have one of the most versatile hangar sections in all of galactic history, so it could carry fuel for both starfighters and land vehicles, depending on the mission. The overall size was part of how it got its name, at a height of 30.4 meters or 100 feet, if you measure to the top of the observation post. That would be nearly 1.5 times the height of the AT-AT, but just the main body was about a Wookiee shorter. At 49.4 meters or 162 feet long, it was 2.5 times the length of the AT-AT, or about 5.5 AATs. The width is 19.6 meters or 64 feet, which is about 3 Wookiees wider than the AT-TE. And just to show you how ridiculous this vehicle is, let's do a comparison for just the wheels. Each was about 7.6 meters or 25 feet tall, making it taller than a Snail Tank and nearly twice the height of the AAT. And it was also about half as wide as the AAT, so it could easily run those things over. Now if the Juggernaut ever landed here on Earth, the lookout would be about as tall as a 10-story building, it would be wider than 5 lanes of traffic, and longer than 3.5 school buses. but still nothing on the Bagger 923, which was more than 3 times as tall, and more than 4 times the length of the Juggernaut. This of course is an awesome size, but even better, it serves some very practical functions. It could carry up to 300 troops, while having enough provisions on board for 20 days, along with fuel for 30,000 kilometers. For reference, the diameter of Earth and Kashyyyk is only around 12,000 kilometers. It could also carry 30 tons of cargo, which is some of the crates that we see all around, and which is a weight equal to 37 dewbacks. Now, as we look around this interior, we can see that there are way less than 300 seats, meaning those were most likely reserved for higher ranking clones, and there would have been a lot of clones stuffed into these open areas. There are 8 gunners for the multiple weapons which we'll look at in a minute, and 12 pilots. That's a lot, but it's because there are 2 separate pilot crews, each located in a separate cockpit. You see, there is no true front of the clone turbo tank. Each cockpit has full control over the vehicle, and the drive and gears are built such that it is just as fast and maneuverable no matter which direction you're going in. That being said, let's be real folks, this is the main cockpit. It has the lights, forward-facing weaponry, and both lookout points view in this direction. Sorry clones in the back, nice trying to make up for your smaller cockpit. Now this one that we have to tour had its cockpit blown apart, but we can see how it would have looked, with the pilot up front here, followed by the navigator, and then a gunner. Commanding officers and Jedi could climb up into this opening to get a better view of the battlefront, while this spotter would be way up here. This was of course the most exposed position, leaving you vulnerable to all sorts of droid sniper fire, but it was considered worth the extra intel gained. He would get into position via these hatches on the roof, and these rungs would retract, allowing the telescopic pole to retract as well. This is a heavy laser cannon turret, followed by a rapid repeating heavy laser cannon over here. Each can rotate 360 degrees and be fired from inside of the Juggernaut, with a cool detail being that the gunner station displays a 3D holographic representation of the battlefront to each gunner. Up here is the communication dish and scanner, important for both acquiring hostiles nearby, but even picking up various encoded transmissions that might indicate an ambush being set up, or even a nearby, previously undetected CIS base. I do want to point out that perhaps these openings work like weapon hardpoints, allowing different things to be fitted into these slots, because with different Juggernauts we do see different weaponry on the roof. Like with Ahsoka's escapades on Felucia, there was this heavy blaster turret with a clone trooper dangerously exposed, instead of the gun that we see on Kashyyyk and in this cross-section. But there is even more firepower. A medium anti-personnel laser cannon extends out of the side here, with this tube in the center being its targeting sensor. And then there's this retractable munitions box on each side that can fire rockets or grenades. These boxes are not rockets, but instead headlights, which not only project visible light, but also wavelengths like infrared in order to provide additional data to the navigator. But this sort of jaw would open up to reveal twin anti-personnel blaster cannons. Now what most likely destroyed the cockpit of these Juggernauts was either the ridiculously powerful cannons of the MTT, one of which we can see right here, concentrated fire from AATs, or some precision bombing from hyenas. Why I don't think this is snails or spiders is because this scarring on the sides is said to be the worst that they can do to a Juggernaut. Now the guns, armor, and tech is usually the most badass part, but we gotta show some love for the amazing engineering that gets this thing moving. First off, let's actually appreciate how high off the ground this thing is, allowing troops to easily walk underneath, acting as protection from enemy air support and mortars. The drive shaft is said to run almost the full length of the undercarriage, with these enormous cylinders housing the steering pinions. Remember, it can drive the same forward or backwards, with steering taken over at either end. And each of the wheels is connected via its own independent suspension. Shock absorbers and the fact that it is 10 independent wheels rolling over the surface allows for the smoothest ride possible. And the wheels being so wide helps for a couple reasons. One is just that the incredible weight of the Juggernaut is now spread over the width of 10 points, instead of something like the AT-ST or AT-AT, which have all of their weight bearing down on a few small points. This made it less prone to sinking into soft or muddy terrain, though it should be noted that it was often paired up with ATTEs that could use its wench to free a stuck turbo tank. Sometimes it would get high-centered by rolling over a rock that lifted the wheels off the ground, but the ATTE was strong enough to pull it free with its wench. That being said, it was a beast on nearly all terrain, due to the fact that each wheel was actually comprised of 3 independent spinning segments. Then look at all the grooves on these sections, and you can see that really they were controlling 30 independently spinning wheels, with the same power forward and reverse, allowing them to tear up any terrain they wanted. and it also must be one of the most difficult vehicles to learn to pilot. On top of that, the clone turbo tank was no misnomer, as its top speed was 160 km per hour or 99 miles per hour, meaning this enormous machine tore across the battlefront at nearly 3 times the speed of the AAT and ATTE. Both its speed and power were on great display during the Battle of Kashyyyk, where it helped the Republic and Wookiees secure a victory over the CIS invaders. And unlike many Republic creations, it was not decommissioned or destroyed by the Empire. In fact, there was even a successor made called the HAVw A9 turbo tank that was used to transport prisoners around the Wobani labor camp, where we saw Jyn Erso get rescued. Many of the A6s left over went to Outer Rim worlds, where they encountered opposition by rebels and primitive native populations. Ahakista had a segment of the population that was set on keeping Imperials off their world, and to stop the Juggernauts, they came up with the idea of zone runners. This was an incredibly dangerous role, where they would run right up to the tank and throw a high explosive satchel right onto the pinion. This wasn't enough to destroy the whole beast, but it would prevent or greatly hinder the Juggernaut's ability to steer. Then on the planet Meridan, we see how the primitive Amani species were able to best the HAV-6. The Imperials had backed up against a cliffside to set up a base, knowing that the Amani can launch attacks from the dense jungles and tall grass. But the natives scaled the mountain and rained down on top of the lookout tower, killing the trooper and presumably throwing explosives inside of the tank via the hatches on the roof. With the press of a button, they detonated the charges, causing a chain reaction that blew apart the Juggernaut from the inside. Overwhelmed and forced into the grass, Amani swarmed up the sides of the beast and fired into the cockpit with stolen Imperial blasters. A true display of how tactics and creativity can beat any machinery. Later, they would be used during the Imperial attack on Hoth, and even after the Empire fell, they would be used as late as 13 ABY by Imperial remnant forces like the Restored Empire. So that's it for its history, but you definitely want to hear these cool facts and behind the scenes stuff. There was a predecessor called the A5, which was based on concept art for Episode 5. The expanded universe used this in some books and comics, but it was only about half the size of the Juggernaut that we eventually saw in Episode 3, so that one got called the A6. Apparently the A5 had some terrible maintenance issues, combined with even worse service by the Republic and Empire. An excerpt from the log of an Imperial machinist on Dathomir reads, Day 17. Forward drive shaft on Juggernaut 11 has snapped. Requesting replacement drive shaft. Day 22. Resubmitting request for replacement drive shaft. Day 38. Drive shaft still has not arrived. Please advise. Day 50. Awaiting drive shaft. Day 123. Awaiting drive shaft. And then Imperial turned Rebel Krixmatine said that this was true for the A6 Juggernaut as well. Now there's a really funny reason for the name Clone Turbo Tank. This is so Hasbro could produce toys of this thing, but the problem was that Toy Biz owned the rights to make a toy called a Juggernaut, secured for making the Marvel character. This is so silly because it's not even a rival character, just a vehicle, and Juggernaut is a word, not just an X-Men character's name. But alas, that's why we got Clone Turbo Tank. Hasbro would later get this Marvel character's name's rights, but they kept their new name for the toy, and you see it on different stuff like the LEGO iterations as well. Now there are a ton of references and appearances of this thing, with that cross-section coming from the Episode 3 cross-sections, and it's also in the complete cross-sections. So here are the sources, split into canon and legends, and if you want to pick up your own copy of those, please check out our links in the description. If you want to connect with us on social media, find ways that you can help support this channel without it costing you a thing, or check out our Patreon. Be sure to check out the links in the description. Special shout out to our supporters over on Patreon, but most important of all, remember, the Juggernaut and ATTE are the only true all-terrain armored transports, and the Force will be with you, always.